The first time Evelyn heard the whispering, she was sorting through a box of old library cards in the archive room of the Westhaven Public Library. Tucked at the far end of the silent building, the air was thick with mildew and forgotten stories. Dust motes shimmered like phantoms in the slanted light from the skylight above, and each card she pulled echoed with the brittle sigh of neglected paper. She initially thought the whisper was just the wheeze of the ancient HVAC ducts or an echo from the children's section, but it persisted, threaded through the air like an unfinished thought. The sound was faint, like a name being repeated. Her name. When she turned around sharply, expecting perhaps a prank from one of the teenage volunteers, the room was as still as a tomb, save for one index drawer slowly clicking closed on its own. Evelyn tried to shake the unease that followed her home, but it clung to her like cobwebs. By the second week of her archiving project, the whispering had turned more distinct, clearer each evening just before the library closed. It was always just behind her, brushing her thoughts like fingertips on piano keys. The words were fragmented. Left, again, behind. Often, she would find books misplaced in grotesquely specific patterns, titles about loss, abandonment, and vanishing people stacked where they didn't belong. She began to double-check the sign-out sheet, but no one had borrowed those books. On a particularly slow Thursday, she found herself staring at the security footage alone, watching a frame where books moved by themselves, tumbling, almost deliberately, off the shelves into the path of an invisible hand. Determined to rationalize it, Evelyn began keeping a journal of the anomalies. She recorded times, temperatures, sounds, and even the phases of the moon, in case some strange environmental factor was at play. She noted how the archive room was always colder than the rest of the building, though the thermostat read a steady 71. Late one evening, she turned off all the lights before leaving and paused at the front desk to retrieve her keys, only to see, in the darkened reflection of the glass doors, the lights in the archive room flicker back on, one by one. Heart-pounding, she returned, scanning aisles, swallowing shadows, but found nothing out of place until she glanced down. In the center of the floor was a yellowed library card labeled, Evelyn M. Carter, overdue. People in town didn't talk much about the library's history, which was odd given its age and prominence. With some effort, Evelyn unearthed old municipal records in the town hall's basement revealing a 1940s disappearance of a clerk named Margaret Ellis. Her body was never found. The final log in Margaret's name was a checkout slip for a book about memory loss. Evelyn found herself inexplicably drawn to Margaret's story, increasingly convinced the whispers weren't just sounds, more like impressions stitched into the walls, the air, the very ink of the books themselves. Sometimes, when the library was silent enough, she swore she wasn't alone, not in the typical haunted sense, but like someone else was reading over her shoulder, breathing in tandem, waiting to be acknowledged. The further Evelyn pushed, the less linear time began to feel. She would lose minutes, entire chapters of her evening swallowed in between glances at the same page. On one occasion, she reached for her coffee and found it cold, much colder than it should have been, though only seconds had passed. She began seeing mirrored versions of herself in the glass-paneled stacks, but their movements would lag slightly behind her own, twitching subtly out of sync. Notes she didn't write appeared in her journal. "Do not forget me," and "You are the key." The final straw came when Evelyn attempted to leave for the night and the front doors refused to budge, despite there being no lock engaged. Shadows slithered behind the circulation desk, and the overhead speaker crackled to life with her own breathless whisper, "Still here." On what she hoped would be her last night cataloging the archives, Evelyn brought a crucifix and a flashlight, scoffing quietly at her own desperation. But the moment she stepped into the archive room, every single drawer of the card catalog exploded open in unison, flooding the floor with thousands of abandoned names. In the center lay a single card with Margaret Ellis's name, scrawled beside the word, "Returned." A cold gust coiled around Evelyn's ankles and a new whisper surged in her skull. One must take her place. The lights failed. In the pitch black, something touched her shoulder. When they found Evelyn's broken watch weeks later, deep inside a shelf that hadn't been opened in decades, it was still ticking but in reverse.